set up here. All right. Welcome, everyone. Super excited to make this video. It's one of the most frequently asked questions I get is tell me a little bit about the CSCS. Like, what is it? Why'd you get it? And how does it kind of fit into your role as a student physical therapist and eventual physical therapist? So today I'm going to answer some frequently asked questions that I've been receiving, give a little background on what this certification actually is, and from there you can go and you can do a little bit more research. But this video is really going to be about getting your feet wet in terms of thinking about if the CSCS might be right for you. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and dive right in. If you have any questions throughout the video, just go ahead, feel free to leave a comment below, and I will be responding to all those when I get around to it. Okay, so first things first, what is the CSCS? Well, it stands for Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. And this is a certification that's awarded by the NSCA, which is the National Strength and Conditioning Association. And this certification is given to anyone who's able to take and pass the CSCS exam. I'm going to talk about the exam specifics moving forward, but in order to pass that exam, you need to be able to demonstrate your ability to not only know, but apply scientific knowledge in terms of strength and conditioning and training to optimize human performance. So that's the main difference between the CSCS and some of the other certifications, is really the ability to not only know the functional movements, know the exercises, but know the why behind why you're doing them. So understanding the best ways to optimize different energy systems for specific sports, because you're not going to train every sport, every athlete the same just based on the energy demands. So this certification is all about understanding why we do what we do as fitness professionals. So I think that's the main takeaway. If you're studying for the exam, that's kind of the reason why you would be doing so, because you want to know a little bit more of the science behind training and performance and the best practices involved. So like I said, this certification is a little bit different than some of the others you might see. CSCS is known and recognized as one of the highest certifications in terms of fitness training. So it's a little bit different than a CPT, which is also a certification you can get through the NSCA. That's just a certified personal trainer, not just, but that's what it stands for. And those individuals will be able to write out exercise programs and things like that. But in testing and things like that, they won't be tested as much on the scientific foundations. CSPS, that's certified populations. And with that, that'll allow you to have a better understanding of working with special groups such as geriatrics, peds, depending on which route you decide to go. And so that's another great certification as well. And then finally, tactical training with the TSAC-F. That's working with military, firefighters, anyone who has a combat type job, making sure that they're ready to be able to carry out their duties. So know your goals, know why you want to get a certification before you just go out and say, okay, I want this certification, but I don't really know why. So again, CSCS is going to be focused mainly on really understanding the scientific principles, the why behind training and performance, and how to get those best results. So that's kind of why I have our picture here, those brain lifting books, because again, it's all about applying that knowledge to our training. So not only knowing how to do it, but knowing the why. So who can take the test? Right now, it's pretty wide open in terms of who's being able to take it. The requisites are going to change a little bit after 2030, but right now all you need is a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter what discipline. You can be business, you can be healthcare, whatever. All you need is a bachelor's degree. You need to be CPR, AED certified. A lot of healthcare professionals already are, and that's why this is sometimes an appealing exam to take, because they already have both of these first two certifications. Then you go ahead and pay the exam fee and then register and take the test within 120 days. So With the registration, usually you'll sign up and then you'll get an email from Pearson VEU. So it's an outside testing company, and they'll help schedule the tests, find you testing sites and things like that. It's usually not too difficult. You just have to plan ahead a little bit because these exam centers are dealing with all kinds of different tests. They don't just do the CSCS examination. So, and I included demographics from the NSCA's website with information on the CSCS just so, I don't know, it just makes things a little bit easier. So if you were to sort through that website, I'm just highlighting things that you'll see. So going back to the changes in 2030. So once we get to 2030, some of the changes that are going to take place are you'll no longer be able to just take the exam if you have a bachelor's degree. You're going to need to have that degree in a strength and conditioning related field. The specifics of what that will include haven't yet been solidified, but I'm imagining it's going to be exercise science type degrees and things like that. So I'm not sure how wide of a scope that's going to be, but the candidates will also need to obtain those degrees from a college and university that has a program which is accredited by an NSCA approved accrediting agency. So they're going to be getting a lot more strict in terms of who can take the exam. So right now might be a good time, just given how open it is to who's able to take it, because it's going to be getting a lot more strict moving forward. So then, just thinking about some different study resources that were helpful when I was studying for the exam. The main books that I used were The Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, 4th edition. And the important thing to note is that although this book has tons of information, is a great baseline, the exam itself is not based on this book. So this book is a good outline to make sure you have some of those baseline concepts down, but the test is not on the book. The test is based on your ability to apply both the knowledge from the book as well as current research and kind of pairing those two together. So use that as an outline, use it as a good resource, but that's not the end all. What was more so helpful for me was looking at a lot of different YouTube videos. The movement system has some great videos and kind of starting to understand how we actually see some of these concepts play out in the gym and things like that. And then Periodization for Sport is also a phenomenal book if you don't have a lot of experience designing programs. I've done training myself, but I have not in the past designed programs for others. This book is awesome. The NSCA will put out study guides and practice exams very similar to the actual exam. These are a little bit pricey, but I would say if you're looking for something to get you over the hump, this could be a good option. And then get in the gym, practice some of the movements that you're going to be teaching. If you've never done them yourself, it's going to be very hard to teach clients and get them to buy in. So how long should you prepare for the exam? Well, this graphic here is taken from the NSCA website, and it gives you an outline of things to consider when deciding how much you should study. But it really does depend on the amount of background you have. So if you have an exercise science related degree, I know a lot of physical therapy students consider the certification. So many of them have an exercise science related degree. Check yes. Do they have internship or practical experience? Have they lifted themselves? Have they trained clients before? If yes, they could probably take the exam within 3 to 6 weeks. However, if no, that stretches out to 3 to 6 months. And that's because without the practical experience, seeing things play out in person, it's hard to know what you don't know, because I think the tendency, especially as physical therapy students, is to think, okay, I've got some background. I know my exercise science super well. Maybe I've lifted weights in the past a little bit. I exercise regularly. This shouldn't be overly challenging. And I think that is that's almost one of the traps you want to avoid when you're studying, just knowing that there's so much knowledge out there, and this is different than studying for a PT exam. It just is. There's different kind of intricacies, different concepts. There's a lot of overlap, but just knowing that they're two separate things that you can't really try and compare if you have a lot of experience in one versus the other. And then if you don't have an exercise science related degree, you can plan between anywhere 4 and 9 months. So a little bit longer, but overall this is a certification that you should be able to get within a year if you put your own mind to it. So then thinking about the actual exam format and how difficult it is, I guess my interpretation of how difficult it is. So the exam is made up of 2 different sections. You've got your scientific foundations section up here, and you've got your applied section below. Like I said before, with the scientific foundations, for those who have a degree in exercise science, half this section is just exercise science. So if you did fairly well in school, paid attention a little bit, this section should not be terribly complicated compared to some of the other sections. Obviously, brush up on everything. Make sure you feel solid about the different concepts, but know that this area should be your bread and butter. Some other interesting topics that you're able to learn about as you study for this section: sports psychology. So we've got 19 questions there, making up about a quarter of those questions, and then nutrition too. So it's important to consider that the CSCS has a good knowledge of some of these things like sports psychology, nutrition, even a little bit of rehab and recovery, but they're not the primary provider of nutritional information. They aren't the primary provider in terms of rehab, but they have enough of that baseline knowledge and information that they can say, okay, I know something's not right, or I know that my client needs some more assistance from someone who has a much greater depth of knowledge in that area. So knowing that we're scraping the surface a little bit with some of these concepts, but the CSCS is very well-rounded all around. They don't necessarily have a specialty in, like I was saying before, nutrition or rehab, but they're well-equipped to be able to provide resources for their clients should they need additional assistance. So you've got 1.5 hours to take that first section. And now comes the fun part. We've got your practical applied section. So this section looks at exercise technique, program design, organization, administration, testing, and evaluation. So this whole section tests your ability to take those concepts from the scientific foundations and apply them to the gym setting. So not only do you have to know and understand the concepts really well, you have to be able to take those concepts and say, all right, how does this translate into the gym? How does this translate to working with my clients? And throughout this section, there's different videos. You'll see different cases with athletes, and then you'll have 2.5 hours to take this section. So it's a 4-hour exam to complete. There's a break in the middle if you would like it. I recommend taking it, recommend bringing a snack into the facility. I learned the hard way that there's no running out to your car to grab a snack bar. So you could be hungry during that back half if you're not prepared. And then overall, it's 225 questions. So 30 of those questions are going to be non-scored. You don't know what questions those are. So over the course of the exam, 30 of those questions are basically test questions. So they could be used sometime in the future, but they're not being used right now. They're just kind of seeing how test takers are responding to them, if they're getting them correct, and comparing them to how the test taker did on the rest of the exam to figure out how valid those questions are in terms of measuring performance. So how difficult is this exam? The first time pass rate for both sections, I believe, is around 60%. The important thing to do, I would say, is just don't overlook this exam. Don't think it's something where, okay, I've got a little bit of background in multiple areas here, it shouldn't be too tough. Just respect the exam for what it is. Know that it covers a lot of information. There's a lot of people who take this exam who want to pass, and it's a challenging exam. So regardless of how much effort some people put in, they still end up having to retake at some point. And if it gets to a situation where you do have to retake, it's not a huge deal. I think it is a situation where you have to wait 90 days, and then you go ahead and retake. If you just fail one section, I think you can retake that one section. You just pay a fee that is about half of what it costs to take the whole exam. And I would definitely recommend signing up for a membership through NSCA if you are going to take the exam. There's a student discount that will basically cut the exam, give you about 30% discount. So then the really big question I see on all kinds of forums, different things like that is, okay, I'm a physical therapy student. I'm learning about exercise. Why in the world would I get my CSCS? Well, I think it's important not to compare the two side to side because they're different. One is not necessarily superior to the other. The DPT is a medical professional. They have great knowledge about orthopedics, neurology, working with the geriatric population. They can work in hospitals. The opportunities are endless within the medical field. They've got a great understanding of different interventions, how muscles move, how muscles work, different pathologies, and how to get individuals back to full health. So to try and compare that to the CSCS is having a phenomenal understanding of tissue, biomechanics, how the body moves, so some crossover with anatomy, but taking individuals, using scientific principles to try and advance them, optimize human performance based on current research, and being able to design in-depth programs for athletes to reach their goals. These could be week-long programs, month-long programs, even year-long programs. So to try and say that one is better than the other, if you have a DPT, don't get your CSCS. The DPT is basically a CSCS. That's not the case, and I think it's not beneficial to try and compare the two because they're so different. The CSCS is not a medical certification. It's not within their scope of practice to be doing any kind of diagnosing, any kind of treatment of the rehab. So I think one of the main reasons that I wanted to get my CSCS was I felt like in PT school, there was a little bit of a gap just in terms of how we were taught interventions. I felt like in general, I learned orthopedic conditions extremely well, but I didn't necessarily have as much knowledge on, creating programs for patients and clients, and really having an in-depth understanding of how to move through a progression if I want to get a client to that next level of health. So I think that if you're considering getting your CSCS, really have a why behind why you're doing it, know the purpose. I think for me, one of the biggest things was I was really interested in continuing to learn a little bit more about how to treat clients. The medical side, I think, is very interesting, as well as working through rehab. But I also think that high sport, high performance knowledge is really kind of cool to have in your back pocket, as well as being able to do some training on the side. So I think that even just in the last 20 weeks in clinic working with athletes, I think through a lot of the principles that I learned when I took the CSCS exam, and I'm able to apply them in working with clients, thinking through the different energy systems involved, what they're trying to get back to, what goals they have. And I think that that's pretty cool. And I will say that anytime you take an additional certification exam, spend time studying for it, there's definitely a growth process. You figure out gaps in your knowledge, you figure out what you don't know, and you try to find ways to work through different concepts that you don't understand. And I think that going through that process, whether or not I use my CSCS, in the sense of doing a ton of training with clients every single day, only high-level athletes, or not, I'm still going to use a lot of these concepts and just thinking through human performance when I'm working with either patients or athletes. So I think the knowledge gained from this exam is pretty cool. It was definitely a grind to study for. I did a little bit of studying during lockdown last March, and then I kind of picked up to the point where I was doing some more consistent studying when I had more time, once my classes ended last semester and working through clinicals. But I can put out more videos and kind of my study schedule and things like that if you guys are interested. If not, this video again is meant to be introduction to the CSCS and kind of give you some different things to hopefully think about and deciding if it might be right for you. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to talk about it with you, and love to try and help out any way that I can. So if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments. If not, have an awesome rest of your day, guys.